Of course, when we were looking in our etc bind directory on our Ubuntu host, we could see that that was the directory that was also used for the zone files. And they were then named db and then some form of name after it. These zone files then contain information about the DNS zone, so the hosts that they're going to resolve to, and they are just plain text files. So we can see that we have the etc bind db.local, and this then has information relating to the local host. So we can resolve then the local host back to the IP address of 127.0.0.1. Similarly, we have then the db.127, and this represents then the reverse lookup zone, which have pointer or PTR records that relate back to the host name. So we can resolve an IP address to a host name. And this is especially useful when we're looking at log files. Very often the log file for a service will be able to say which IP address accessed it. But if we could then translate that IP address back to a host name, that's a little bit more useful to us when we go through analyzing our logs. When we're creating our log files, we can also auto-generate our records. So for example, if we were trying to create a reverse lookup zone, we might use then the $generate keyword and then specify the range. Here we're looking at, say, 10 to 254. And then we use then the value that we're currently working with. We might be on 10. And we can say that's a pointer record to DHP-10. Again, you can see that we're using the dollar symbol here, DHP-$. So the dollar becomes the placeholder to the value that we're currently using within the range. Of course, that's going to start at 10 and go all the way through to 254. So especially where we have DHCP entries like this, where we want to create then names for the DHCP addresses that we are assigning, then this becomes a very easy way that we can create a whole load of records without putting each one of these records in itself. Now we'll see more on creating zones later, but let's just acquaint ourselves with these text files for the moment. So moving through on the Ubuntu host through to etc/bind, we then ls our db star, we can see then that we've got various zone files. When we go through and cat out the db.local, then we can see this is a straightforward text file. Again, the details we'll look at later, but we've got our start of authority records, which is really then specifying who looks after this zone. And then the name servers, so this could actually specify then the master server and the slave servers if we have slave servers. And then we have the address records, and we can see that we've got an address record with the single A, and that's the IP version 4 address. And we've got then an address record with 4 A's, and that's then the IP version 6 address, so ::1. So of course all of this is relating then back to our own host, then having pointers through to, or addresses through to, the 127 address. When we clear this out with Control L, if we want to look at how that relates to our configuration, if we go through and then grep for, say, local, we'll look for that string local within then the configuration, so name.conf.default zones, and we can see then we've got a reference to the local host zone and pointing through then to the file. So for each one of our zones that we look after, we have to have a zone record within our named.conf. Now, I know this is in then the name.conf.default zones. However, of course, this is included within our main configuration. One of the things that we might do to help secure a DNS server is to use chroot jails. So let's just take a look at what we mean by chrooting and chroot jails.